Welcome to our little podcast here. I'm really looking forward to hearing everything that you have to say and talk about ERAS 2 because I think it's a really special project, not only in the Pirates Ahoy community and Buccaneers Reef community, but also especially in the whole Western and English community for the Sea Dogs games, given that it's kind of unique in the sense that it is, I think, one of the only mods that is trying to have as much historical accuracy as possible. And so I would really like and love to hear from you what your motivations were to start the project, what the current state of the game is, and also in regards to whatever you can tell us about the future developments.
Yeah, I've got all that in my talking points, and I'd be glad to tell you all about that. Thanks for having me, and I guess I would start out by saying that the reason why I got into the whole thing to begin with was because I've always been a student of history, and I started out just loving it as a kid and drinking it in. I was a member of the history book club where I'd get a book a month when I was 10 years old. So that started me on the journey. I had read all of the old chroniclers, Froissart, and Mortar D. Arthur, all of the great old mythos, Two Lives of Charlemagne, etc. by the time I was 9 years old. So I was really into that sort of thing and expanded as I went into my teen years. So I ended up having a long military career. I'm a retired Army colonel, and I was always fascinated with the old swashbuckler movies, Errol Flynn and the pirates and all of that. And anywhere I went, I sought out all of the old sailing ship replicas, and I just was unbelievably motivated by it all. When I was living in Germany for 5 years, I took any opportunity I had while the Batavia was still being built to go out and see her. And I went to the launching even when she was launched. And even went back when I was doing work with NATO, and they'd send me back to The Hague for meetings. I would go down and see what was happening with the Zeven Provincian replica, and was always very disappointed that that project completely stagnated. So when I finally got some time, when I was a major, I decided to delve into gaming. I'd never had a chance to really get into gaming before, but as a major, they allowed me to take a functional area. They sent me to school for several master's degrees, and I chose functional area 57 and was accepted. And 57 is a career field where you become an expert on automations, simulations, simulators, and video games, and knowledge management of real-world information systems. So I became one of the Army's foremost 57s and went to the very top of my career field. I was in charge of battle labs and whole experimentation series on future experiments, and became an expert and a program manager. And I managed the FireSim 21, the most realistic artillery simulation in the world, for 4 years. And then I went on to help with project development, a program manager with the America's Army video game, if any are familiar with that. And then the Virtual Battlespace 2, which is now Virtual Battlespace 3, VBS2, VBS3, which is on many platforms. You can get it on Xbox now with an Xbox controller. And it mounted and dismounted combat in rural and urban terrain. It's for training soldiers, but they exported it to where it was a sellable title and is on the commercial market and has been for a number of years. And I was key in the development of those VBS series of games. So I started to delve in when the Russians started to come out with the very first Sea Dog series. Oh wow, I had to jump into that. When I had spare time, I started really playing the heck out of it. And I was a lurker on the Seaward forums for years. So way back very early on. And I was a lurker on Pirates Ahoy for years before I actually decided to put my head up and start participating in modding. And so I kind of led or helped to very much lead the very first Gentleman of Fortune modding effort. And my goal was always to try to eliminate the unrealistic and the fantasy elements from the game. So when we first put the combined mod together, Jonathan Aldridge was the name of the guy, and he put about every model that was available into the mix. And there were just dozens, and a lot of them were just terrible models. They were models left over from Secret Far Seas and from some of the online early MMOs, and they were just very badly done and looked very fantasy, very unrealistic. Some of them looked like they were made from Legos. And it bothered me, that inconsistency. And so I set about, when we started the Gentleman of Fortune effort, trying to eliminate that from the game. And that was the very first effort, was to try to, hey guys, let's try to put something more realistic together. I got a lot of pushback from the team when I wanted to try to eliminate uniforms and characters that weren't realistic for the time when pirates were most active, the Golden Age, roughly 1648 to 1725 era. And we had ones that were from earlier on during Drake and Hawkins period with the Anglo-Spanish Wars. And we had characters from later on during the 1700s, during the Napoleonic era, Nelson era, and it was a kludge. Everything looked out of place. We had ships from the 1800s sailing around with ships from the 1500s. So I always used to make the joke that it looked like a Pippi Longstockings movie. If anybody's seen the old Pippi Longstockings, which in Europe they call Pippi Longstrumpf, and I sort of grew up with those as a kid even. Her silly big ponytails that go out to the sides, and she can do anything, fly and everything else. But there were always the little pirate ship battles, and you'd have a 14th, 15th century carrack facing off against Nelson's flagship in those movies. And so it was always very funny to see Pippi Longstockings' little Victoria Neo carrack from 1490 defeating Nelson's victory. Real laugh for anybody that could see that historical issue. So what I set about doing really was trying to get things to look right. And so one of the very first things I did was I got into texturing. I learned how to use the Photoshop tools. I learned how to change the ships, and I was shown by a lot of great guys how to do all of that. And so I immediately tried to change models. Now, one of the first things that we ran into as a mod team, probably the second year in, was that there was an incredible amount of instability in the game, and it crashed constantly. And the other mod team members wanted to blame it on the fact that we had too many ships, which I said that could not be proven. It absolutely was not that. They did all kinds of experiments where we ripped out half the ships from the game, and it still crashed left and right. So I had always suspected that it was code problems with geometry, and it would make calls that could not be answered and just crash the game. And when Jeffrey finally took over and jumped on board after we'd broken away from Pirates Ahoy and started doing our own thing, he confirmed that there were just all kinds of geometry problems with the game, and those geometry problems with even incorrect coordinates that had been put on a ship, say, and there would be a pulley sitting out in the middle of the ocean somewhere that no one would ever even see or notice, but that one little pulley would cause the whole game to crash. And we set about eliminating that. We cleaned up a lot of the models, but Jeff put stuff in the code to where if there were any of those weird little exceptions, the game would just ignore them and continue to run. And that was one of the first things we did to achieve stability. And he was just an absolute stickler for finding all of those problems and just going after them like a pit bull. he had never done video game stuff before, but he took to it, and Jeff is brilliant. He's a genius, and he can see anything that has to do with a call or a code problem, where the problem lies, and he can troubleshoot it. He can build a utility to find those things and weed them out. And the more people tested the game and got more involved in it and sent in error reports, because I was the main tester for the longest time, I would play more hours than anyone else, and I would have a couple dozen crash reports to send him, and he'd go after them. At one point, we had something like 83 simultaneous crash reports that he was working on, and he really went after it. And that was great, because no longer did I have to hunt through and try stuff by trial and error, because I'm not a coder by background. I had dozens of coders working for me when I was a program manager and a project lead for things, and I know my way around code, but I could never find those things or write those things. And I mean, I remember even Peter Bolin giving me hints on how to rewrite things and restructure things so that I could get them to work before Jeff came on. And it was very helpful, just the little hints he would give me, because I was able to fix dozens of things just from that trial and error. But I joked when Jeff first came on the team that things that would take me a month to fix through trial and error and trying to rewrite code in different places myself, and I've succeeded a lot. I did fix a lot of things on my own, but he could do in a day or two what it would take me a month or two to do. And so it was really, really great when he came on board and just took us to an entirely different level. And when he and I decided that we were going to try to go commercial in some aspect, and that we were going to get everything completely rebuilt from the ground up. I mean, Jeff will say that, 40, 50% of the original code is still there in some sense. But even that foundation of the 40 or 50% code and the freeware stuff that was given away by the 1C guys once they went bankrupt, he has gone in and modified a ton of that even. So what I like to tell people is that half of what you're seeing in the engine is new. He didn't just rewrite spaghetti code. Jeff would go in and he would completely dismantle whole sections of code, or whole even folders or pages of syntax on how something was implemented, and he would say, this is nonsense the way they implemented it. They implemented it in such a way to where you're just going around in circles, and we could just directly go there if we write it this way. And so he would write a completely new process, and he would do it in a single page, what had been a dozen pages that were written by the previous coders. And so there's just an immense amount of efficiency in Maelstrom over the native Storm code. And once we saw that we had something completely and uniquely different from the native, that's when we decided that we would get a legal team working for us out of Portland, Oregon, and that we would go to the patent office and that we would get everything blessed and legal. And we agreed we would never sell anything that was provided by modders. And I will say this right up front, no matter how controversial anybody says it is, that over 90%, I would say even probably 94% of the stuff in the mod, I asked for permission to use it. And so models that you see were given to me by dozens of different people, from Polish modders that had been working on stuff for Mountain Blade and saw that all the work that they had done was never going to come to light, and they wanted it to be used somewhere. And so they gave me complete permission to use all of their models and just dumped it all on me.
Oh, wow.
Erasio took a bunch of old models that had never had anything done to them, and Erasio, I think one of the reasons why I think maybe Erasio gave up on me and left us is because I had a huge list of to-do stuff for him. and he hated working on other people's junk. He liked to do things on his own from the ground up, and everything he made was absolutely gorgeous. If anybody has looked at the cabins in ERAS, and all the unique details in the cabins, they're far beyond what was ever in the original games. They're just amazing. And if you look at some of the ships that he made native, like the early Spanish galleon from the late 1500s, that model is just unbelievably beautiful. And that's the model that you see in the splash screen when ERAS starts up, that Spanish galleon that Orazio built. And that was one of my very favorite ships, and he based that on the Bjorn Landstrom model that you find in that very famous book that he wrote called The Ship. And Orazio used the plans out of that, and he built that model. And I felt like I was a kid in a candy store, because it was one of the very first models as a child that I'd had from the old Lindbergh line of plastic models that I had built. And I felt like, wow, this is why I do this. This is why I live for this, because now, I'm not playing with my little model ship, imagining it, in my hands and painting it badly as a kid because I couldn't paint worth a crap. Now I've got this real, beautiful 3D model that has sailors walking around on it and guns that really fire, and I can maneuver it, and I can fight with it, and I can do all kinds of things with it. And so it really, brought that aspect alive. I do want to say something too. I'm not going to use his last name because I don't know that he wants to be recognized publicly, but I will use his first name. A lot of the models that we have from Stefan are the most beautiful models I've ever seen. And he kindly gave us permission to use everything he had built. And in fact, he had given other people permission to use some of his models. And I think he was angry with them because he had gorgeous models that nobody was even considering using. And so they were just sitting there. Nobody even knew about them. And I'm like, my God, Stefan, these are just beautiful. And I thanked him so much. And we used every single one that he gave me. And I'm very proud of those. If anybody has seen our lineup of English naval ships, those are Stefan's work, and they're just some of the most beautiful work I've ever seen. The capital class battleships, the first rates, second rates, third rates that he built that are from that era, the Restoration era, from Charles II up to William III in English history. Those models are some of the finest 3D models you'll find anywhere. And I mean, we're talking about tens of thousands of polys. And it doesn't matter the way Jeff wrote the code. The polys, the amounts of polys really doesn't matter to ERAS or to Maelstrom. And that's why we've been able to run such high poly models with no crashes whatsoever. One of the things Jeff had considered was moving to a higher level DX. We had discussed going to DX 10 or 11, and we decided to stay with 9. And the big reasons for that is because when he started to take apart particles, and we saw how amazingly resource intensive that particles are, and this is why I'm excited about your Unreal project, but I'm also very skeptical of it, because unless you have a very, very high-end machine that can handle all of those particles from the latest DX series, you're not going to be able to have battles where you're having 50, 60, 70, 80 ships involved. And in ERAS, you can potentially have fleets, a Spanish treasure fleet that can have up to 60, 70 ships in it. And we made it historically realistic, and we upped the caps. And if you've ever seen one in ERAS that big, they are there. You'll see them running around the Horn of Cuba towards Havana, 60, 70 ships together in 2 columns. And that was another thing that Jeff did also. In the older Storm games, you notice everything is either a cluster or they're running in a single column. And Jeff built it to where you can put your own fleet into a double formation, double line, or the enemy can run their formation in a double line. So the Spaniards will always do that when they have a lot of ships. They'll run their fleet in a double line. And that makes things a lot of fun when you're going in trying to cut a few galleons out to get the gold off of them. And so, I mean, you could potentially run into that treasure fleet, and suddenly a French fleet comes out from nowhere and battles that fleet. And so now you've got a fleet of 70 ships battling a fleet of 30 ships, and then you might have your 8 in there too. So, you know, potentially you've got a battle with 100 ships. And if your machine is decent, you're not going to lag. You're not going to have any issues. The simulation runs perfect, and I've done it. I've encountered those large battles where you'll just run into a couple of huge fleets fighting one another. And that was the big reason why we decided not to go to a higher DX, because we were worried with all of the particles, as unbelievably resource intensive as they are, that we would start to get lag with the X10, 11. And we wouldn't be able to enjoy those wonderful, seamless, large battles that we have where there's absolutely no lag, very high FPS rates, and it's just very fun and enjoyable. So, you know, the reason why I'm showing the, you know, classic paintings here is I wanted to let people know that when I started into this, I always had it in my mind that the portrayal of the era in movies is just completely off, and the, you know, manner of the flags, you know, here you can see Arnold DeLange's work here, who is a very, very good friend of mine, and he does amazing historically accurate work. And here you can see the blood flag in this, the correct Spanish colors with the Royal Jack there on the Osario, which the Amelia in the foreground is battling Tromp's famous warship. I wanted our game to reflect the look in those great classic paintings. And in every regard, with regards to weapons, with regards to the correct flags, with the regards to the ship's decoration, the color of the buildings, the manner of the buildings, the dress of the soldiers and the people. And so really well, that's not right, but really my whole attempt was to get the game to look and feel like those great classical paintings from the Golden Age era, where you know, all of the great powers were fighting. You had more wars than had ever been seen before. You know, everybody seems to love the 18th century so much, but you look at the battles and the wars in the 18th century, and they were not nearly so messy or long or incongruous. Just the amount of everybody fighting each other, constant warfare throughout the 17th century, it makes it a very difficult period to even study and get your arms around. And the 18th century was so much more simple, with even long periods of peace during the 1740s, 50s, where you had some, you know, belligerents fighting one another. You know, Frederick the Great on the continent taking on Russia and Austria, the Prussians growing. But, you know, on the world scene, there just wasn't a ton going on until the 7 Years' War started. Right at the beginning of the century, you had the, you know, wars of the Austrian succession, war of the Spanish succession, and you had the French and the Spanish fighting again. But, you know, you just didn't have the scale of global conflict that you did, and the absolute competition for trade that you did during the 17th century. So, you know, I was attempting to try to capture that, and that's what I did. And if anybody has read the historical background, you know, I rewrote everything in the game. I rewrote all of the historical narratives, a lot of the dialogues to reflect that kind of thing. Even the sound bites. If you're talking to somebody, you'll run into people and they'll say, "Long live the king." You know, we expanded everything, every possible place where we could improve something and add something, we did. And that's one of the reasons why, you know, the mod has always been so large, and we've got a lot of criticism about that, is because of all of the added music, which you either love the music or you hate the music. But I've gotten far more compliments on how good the music is, and how so many people love it, than I've gotten a few people saying, "What the heck is this? You know, why do you have classical music, you know, in the game?" But you know, we have toggles to where you can change it around. We have sea shanties. We have people that have added alternative soundtracks. Heck, Jeff even put a heavy metal soundtrack together for a little while, just for fun. I don't think there were very many tracks in it, but you know, he was messing around with that. Even my son got involved. My youngest son made his own music mod. Sedulius is his modern name, and it was pretty popular for a while. And one of the reasons he did that was because he didn't like what I was doing as far as adding sort of classical fusion pieces that had drums or a more modern sound or beat to them. I kind of like that classical fusion stuff, and so I've added a lot of that to the game. Anyway,
yeah. I was just gonna say, it's awesome hearing your historical inspiration for this, and just hearing the level of detail you put into it, and just the whole story and rationale and background and everything. It is actually really just fascinating to hear all that, and just sounds like you tapped on to Mircinelli's questions about Orazio and the models and stuff, and then like someone was asking, do you plan on showing any in-game screenshots today, or?
Yeah, I'm gonna show some screens here in just a minute. I will tell you this, that a lot of the new content I'm not gonna show yet because I want it to be a surprise for March. But I'll show a few things.
Gotcha.
So
just so you know, for the screenshots stream, it says your
see if that's gonna show.
There we go. Yeah, for those listening to the audio version, he's sharing screenshots along with classical paintings of some of the battles.
So I will say, let's see. The only thing I missed, I think, is on the fantasy stuff. I said I was trying to make it realistic, but I did want to say one other thing too about Jeff's breakthroughs, and that's that one of the things I'm most proud of is that Jeff was able to make it to where you have unlimited amounts of skins that you can have per model. So if you remember the original game, in fact, the original, the reason why they put multiple holes in was so that you could upgrade your ship, so that you could have like a lead sheathed hole underneath, and so it would show that physical difference on the model, and that was the original intent behind that, was to show your upgrades. But then when COAS came out, the developers decided, well, we'll have several different versions of the ship. We'll have a light one, and we'll have a dark one, and we'll have a medium one, and so that's why you see those 4 hole folders, sometimes 3 hole folders for each ship. And not every one of them has them. It was very confusing when I first started modding it, because the Russians, when they didn't bother making variants for it, they would just have the exact same folders replicated 3 times and the exact same textures in each one. And so what we did when Jeff expanded that out, when I told him, hey, I've got all of these great skins I've done on these ships, and I would love to have them all available to show up in the game as a possible ship that you could encounter or buy, and then a way that you could repaint your ship so that you could have those different skins. And he was able to expand all of that. And we have some models that have up to 16 different skins. And and they're not all my skins. I was able to get permission from some of the Corsair's Harbor guys to use some of their skins. In fact, some of them just sent them to me, gave them to me. They said, "Hey, I did some new skins of that really great ship that you had. Feel free to use them." And I'm like, "Yeah, these are great. I will use them." And it was amazing how a lot of the Russian modelers, from the Corsair's Harbor side, just came out and said, "Hey, love what you're doing. I've done this stuff. I've got this new character. Would you like to have it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." So, I mean, I had people coming out of the woodwork just giving me stuff. I have an entire huge folder of stuff that people have given me that I have never used. I have model ships that are absolutely gorgeous that I have never been able to get anybody to convert into the game. I mean, just beautiful models. And when Erasio left us, he had those ships on his list to finish and integrate into the game, but we have no one that can do that for us now. We have gone out there and tried to find someone who could do it for us and even pay them, but I have yet to find anybody that can come on board who's familiar enough with the way it's done and actually do what we need done. I've even given a couple of guys all the tools necessary and let them play around with it to see if they could actually do it for us, and they never got back to me. So it's not that we weren't trying, it's just we're kind of stagnant as far as that goes right now. But I did want to say that in the new stuff that's coming out, we've got about a dozen new ships that are going to be introduced. Now, some of these are just glorified re-rigs and retextures with different stats, but they look completely like different ships. They add to the tapestry, in my opinion. And I've got some of those you'll see in the screenshots. But anyway, the one thing I wanted to say on the fantasy business is that the exception to that, and I've gotten a lot of criticism for that, is leaving the skeletons in the game. The German team, when they did their own mod, they changed them to thugs. When you go into the cave, you'd find a bunch of thugs, and you see that in New Horizons too, where you'll go into a cave and there'll be a bunch of thugs in there going after you in the caves. But I chose to leave that little bit of a fantasy element in the game where we've got the Inquisitors and all that sort of thing. If you've played the mod, you'll notice though that they all look bloody and nasty and have demonic markings all over them, like there's some sort of possessed beings. So I put a slightly different angle on it than the original game had. And then 10% or so, I'd say roughly 10% of our characters are fictional. I wouldn't call any of them fantasy, but from Helen Taverill, from the great Robert E. Howard, who really started the sword and sorcery genre, and his novelette on Helen Taverill, the great female pirate, that was right from that era, and it's a brilliant piece of work that I read when I was a kid. So she's in the game, and we've got a bunch of we left some of the original fantasy, or fictional rather, characters in the game that are female. And then we added a whole bunch of historical female characters, or pseudo-historical, like from movies, like Morgan Adams from the Cutthroat Island movie, and gals like that. So there's a little element of fiction, but I feel like Spitfire from the famous Against All Flags movie with Errol Flynn, she's in there. Spitfire Stevens. Anyway, so if it's from that classic era of swashbuckling and from the famous Hollywood movies and all of that, yeah, you'll find some of those fictional elements in the game, and I didn't want to detract from the historical, so anything that we put in that's fictional is meant to sort of dovetail into it to where it is in harmony with the historical feel. It doesn't look like something completely off base or just totally out to lunch. Now, March is our forecast for the new stuff, and so I will say that there are 30 new characters. They're all historic. Most are from the later part of the age, 1685 to 1720. They've been mainly influenced by books that I've read. A big one was a book, very old book, published in the 1830s, 40s, called The Privateers of America, and it covers a lot of names that are virtually ignored, that really, really did a lot of stuff and were very active in the Caribbean. A lot of people don't realize, and I learned this through a lot of Bennerson Little's research in his books, that the pirates often could not sell off their cargo in the Caribbean anywhere. So they would often go to Boston or to New York, New Amsterdam to fence the goods. So they're selling them to those Yankee ports. And so there's a huge amount of historical record that has been virtually ignored by a lot of historians, that documents a whole slew of famous pirates going to Boston to sell stuff off. And it's funny too, in my own research, I've been writing a book on pirates and privateers for about the last decade. Some of them got caught doing it. And they'd end up with nothing after they left Boston and have to go back to the Caribbean with no ship or on a tub and start over again. And it's some of them barely escaped with their lives. And it's just so fun to read through and find those elements like that and take that guy who really did that stuff and throw him in with a very realistic bio. One of the things I will also say that we added, and you're seeing some of the personal flags, which we have a huge amount of personal flags. The personal flags are being added too. I've been given more stuff by other people that I was able to authenticate and show that it was real for the time. So there's about a dozen more flags being added. And then if you don't want to play as the historical character, and another thing on the historical characters, you'll notice that there's quite a few that actually have different uniforms that when you change from the merchant's clothes to the armor, that they'll look differently. Now, Jeff was able to change it brilliantly to where when you put the clothes on, instead of it being just this clunky looking breastplate or a different texture of clothes on the same model, that we were able to use a completely different model when you do that. So sometimes when you change into the rags to try to look like a ragamuffin trying to sneak in, it will be a completely different new character that pops up when you change your clothes. And I can tell you for the March mod, I've tweaked a bunch of other characters to have that, to where they are the different models when you go through the different sets of clothes. So awesome. Now I wanted to add too that if we get the new map implemented, and let me tell you, that was Orazio's big project, and I was very much leading that. All the reason why the islands and the mass world looked the way they did was because I took all of the existing models of the islands and I resized them and I reoriented them to look correct for a Caribbean map. And then he took that and he baked it together and really got a pretty good result. But he was still doing the final texturing, and we hadn't imported all the new forts and towns in yet when he disappeared on us, and we still don't know what happened to him. Jeff and I have been worried that maybe COVID got him. We don't have any idea. I tried numerous times to get a hold of him through email and got nothing back. Who knows? Car accident. I have no idea. Stuff changing in the family. But we do have new people coming onto the team, but they're not really modelers. They're more AI guys, and I'll talk about that more in a little bit. But if we do get that new map done and shared between the collaboration, then there will be a lot of new places. If Jeff shared the map with you that I had originally done, where I numbered all of the places to reflect all of the, what I'd done was I gave a giant set of files to Erasio. I shared it through Mega with all of the towns that I wanted to go in each one of those numbered spots. So I'd already picked what things were going to go where, and sorted it all out. I'd done most of the work as far as this is just what needs to go there. And then Jeff and I were going to rewrite all of the locations and it files so that they would cover all those new places and have the correct coordinates for them. And that, because that's the simple way to add locations. If you've played ERAS, you know that we have a couple of added locations that were not in the original COAS. One of the other things I wanted to say about that, since we were talking about the hull textures, there are several places you can take your ship, the larger ports, and ask the shipwright for a repaint. And you can save scum if you want, and just save, and then, because it's random. When you pay him to repaint your ship, it's random what'll show up when you get done. So if you don't want to spend all the money to repaint your ship and not get the hull you want, you can save scum and just keep going back until you get the hull you want. Or if you're curious about the way all the different ones look, because we have a whole lot of them for that particular ship, just keep playing around and go back to your save and have him paint it again over and over again. But anyway, so
I apologize. I just, before you go on further, I just sorry to hear about Orazio losing contact and whatnot. And hopefully they're able to come back at some point. And then also we did have a couple of questions in regards to the new content. So I just wanted to kind of put them out there, and then just let you continue from there. Basically, they're asking, do you have any plans to implement any new quests in the ERAS? And also, will the added nation of Portugal appear more prominently in future updates? And then, and I think you kind of tapped on this with the map thing a little bit, but you added an additional colony on Cayman. Are there any more new locations planned?
We have 2 new locations planned on this map. If the new map isn't implemented, we have, if any of you are familiar, that everybody likes to say that when the Second Dutch War ended, or the Third Dutch War ended, because the Dutch took back New Amsterdam during the Third Dutch War. Cornelius Evertson sailed in there with a fleet of ships and retook it and kept it till the end of the war. And then it was ceded by treaty that time to the English. And the deal that they made was that the English had built a couple of forts in Suriname, and the Dutch looked at Suriname as one of their richest colonies in South America, and it's largely Dutch to this day. But they didn't like those English forts and settlements there. And then the English also had 2 small spice islands. They were called A and Run. And every other spice island was Dutch by that time. They had a complete monopoly. So it bothered the crap out of them that they had these 2 spice islands and that they had those forts in Suriname. So they traded New Amsterdam to get the English out of Suriname and for the English to give up those last spice islands to them, because they thought that was the better deal at the time. They thought New Amsterdam was sort of a lost cause because of all the English colonies around it. And so the colony of New Middelburg, which was the large town in Suriname, was considered at the time to be more of a bustling port and richer than New Amsterdam was. And so I thought it would be very fitting to add New Middelburg. So if you look down at the very, very bottom of your map on the lower right-hand corner, New Middelburg will appear there, and that'll be an additional large Dutch town that you'll be able to go to. So like where you have Trinidad and Tobago now at Port of Spain, if you go down to that very lowest level, if you're familiar with the Seawolf quest, where you always run into the Seawolf when you have to try to take it with the smaller ship, New Middelburg will be south of that area where you run into the Seawolf. And then Margarita, the town of Margarita on the mainland coast, will also be there too. So, and Margarita is a completely new place, whereas New Middelburg is one of the Pirates of the Caribbean towns with the fortification all around it that we imported. So we're hoping, though, that the new March version will maybe be this new map, though, because that's going to change our plans if you guys are able to get that finish, obviously. And it's very exciting for me to hear that that's what's going on, that all that work that we had done, because there was a lot of work put into that. And that was probably the thing I was the most disappointed about when Orazio left, was that we had that thing 98% finished. It was very close. We were planning on implementing it in a few months when he left, and it sort of took the wind out of our sails. I just sort of gave up on doing anything when that happened. So it's very exciting to me that work was not for nothing, and that you guys have taken the ball and run with it, because now it won't be wasted. And I was elated when Jeffrey told me that you're working on that. Also, there'll be more retexturing. If you've already noticed in ERAS, the English towns have a lot more brick in them, which is historically correct. If you've looked at old pictures of Port Royal before the earthquake, almost everything was brick in the town. So even the ruins, when you see them diving off the ruins that sunk into the water there at Kingston, Jamaica, everything's brick. And so you're going to see more brick in English towns. You're going to see more stucco in the Spanish towns. And I've got a couple of screenshots that reflect that as well. So you're going to see a few more colorful buildings in the Dutch towns, because I more ignored the houses. But when I went and did that New Middelburg colony, I decided to make the houses more half-timbered and colorful too. And I based a lot of that on old prints that I found in the museum on Curaçao. If any of you have ever read my article on Buccaneer's Reef about me traveling to the Dutch West Indies and finding all of the old forts, I was also able to find some really, really old illustrations that are contemporary from the 17th century of what Curaçao originally looked like. And they're in color. And they even show the ships in the harbor, which is just absolutely amazing to see the little, actually some fairly large warships sitting there, which shows you how important Curaçao was in the 1660s and 70s. The fact that you've got a bunch of two-deckers, with 60 guns sitting there guarding the port. Everybody wants to believe that, Pirates of the Caribbean, there's just all these little tiny backwater ports with little ships. And here you see these massive warships guarding the harbor. And that illustration's really funny too, because you see one English advice boat with the cross of St. George, so it's like they've sent a little ship in to negotiate, and it's sitting there all by itself, surrounded by big Dutch warships. I should have found that image to put here on the podcast so you can see it. It's actually on the Buccaneers Reef website. It's in the article I wrote about Curaçao. Anyway, that's why I decided to make the Dutch towns a little more colorful. So a dozen new ships, some more music, a whole bunch of new skins on a couple of dozen of the existing ships. And there is one thing I will say too, that one of the things that Jeffrey and I have not done at all is promotion. We have not tried to promote or advertise what we're doing at all, and we felt like we weren't ready to. And when Orazio left, we just kind of started to waffle and flap around. So I've kind of got my bearings back now, and we're going to rebuild the website. Some of the GoDaddy guys already rebuilt a bunch of the website for me, so it looks much better and is a lot cleaner. We lost some of the links, but it's a ton better than it was, and we are revamping the site. And then I've been trying to find, I've got new articles to go on the front page that will be going up too. A lot of them about a bunch of the discoveries that I've made that I've been writing about as far as from that era. But I've been trying to find an influencer. And you guys are going to laugh at me because I think the best way to get noticed is to find a biscuit. Some young, really hot, pretty girl in her early 20s or late teens who has, hundreds of thousands of followers. And she's all into all this inane stuff now, but if I can get her to dress up like a pirate and actually promote a video or two and just give her a cue card to talk off of, I think maybe we'll get a lot more exposure and a lot more people looking at what we're doing. And so I've already talked to a couple of girls, and one I really thought was going to be the one, and I thought we sort of had a deal lined up, but she ended up being a complete and utter fraud. She wasn't even the person that she said she was. So it's just amazing what you run into out there on the internet. Anyway, I've got another girl that I'm talking to now, actually a couple of girls I'm talking to now that don't have the following the girl I wanted had, but their following is still quite good. And my thoughts are that with this just completely devoid of any type of attention span generation, seeing the pretty young girl and being the complete simps that they are, doing anything that she'll tell them to do, when she, in her little pretty little voice in her pirate outfit, tells them, hey, you need to play this, they'll all run out and get a copy. So that's sort of my idea there. We'll see what happens.
Well, hey, I wish you the best, though. Hey, any way you can market stuff out there, if it works, it works. If it's, but yeah, no, they're definitely, but I definitely hear you in terms of getting influencers onto stuff. Lately, how we've been getting more attention, though, we've noticed, and I guess in a way it's more organic attention, in my opinion at least, because like we've started up this podcast where we're kind of talking with everyone who's doing anything with like pirate games or mods or whatnot. So it's that's and I'm really happy it's actually working out for us pretty well in terms of getting more attention with the Discord and whatnot. And there's people here who I haven't seen before at any point, and it's cool talking with them. And I help out with the Discord, and DH does a lot too. And yeah, it's and then yeah, just but yeah, no, like I said, I hear you, and especially we're kind of a niche community, the whole maritime pirate era community of gamers and stuff. Until Sea of Thieves, there really wasn't even a mainstream game that could even touch on what we appreciate in a lot of these games. So I that's one reason why I like supporting Pirates Ahoy and like supporting all this stuff, is just to kind of unite everyone who does like this type of game, show some interest. So maybe it'd be cool to see more studios take this genre more seriously in general. But anyway, just before we go too much into anything else, just to answer the other two questions by Neat Chart, were there any quests you were planning on implementing or expanding Portugal at all?
Well, we, in the new Middleburg colony, there is going to be what's called a contour. So what we haven't finished that part yet, but Jeff and I have completely vetted it out and talked about it. In some of the larger colonies, we were wanting to have more than one merchant. So you have a lot of those buildings that aren't used, and like they look like warehouses in certain places. And it's funny because in the newer Seaward, or not Seaward, but the Black Mark games, they actually put some people in a couple of those places, and so we're looking to do the same sort of thing, but instead of it being like a local port authority, we're going to have another merchant. So if you get turned down by the merchant, which annoys a lot of people when they go and the merchant says they're too busy to buy or sell your goods and to go away, unless you threaten the merchant and you have either a bloody assassin reputation or a hero reputation, which if you threaten him, then your hero reputation goes down, but then he'll buy your goods.
Oh, I think you're...
Am I still on?
I can
Yes,
hear you, but
yeah.
your camera's just off.
Okay, that was my dog. He came in and he completely knocked my computer over that's underneath. So, well, since you can still hear me, I'll keep talking.
Yes.
So, what we're going to do is add another merchant to some of the big towns like that, to where we have the ability to do, if you get turned down, you can go to a different merchant and still sell the stuff. The other thing too is that we're going to put in a couple of the colonies. So what we were looking at is one in Carousel and one in New Bittelberg. Since they were still trading, we're going to have it to where one of the merchants in the town will be Portuguese. So if you're a Portuguese guy playing as Portuguese, even though there's no Portuguese colonies, you can go to Portuguese contours and get missions from those merchants. So that's the way we were looking at taking that on. Now, if you are able to get the new map implemented, we had actually, I think one of the numbers, because we were modeling a little more of South America, I think I had one Portuguese port that we had modeled in place. I'm trying to remember what we called it. But so that, that is where we were going with the Portuguese stuff. I know people were really excited when we added the Portuguese faction and the ships, and it's just the Portuguese really didn't have anything else north of where we have the game map, and so that's why we've got that limitation. Historically, if we could somehow add something from Portugal that's realistic, I would certainly be willing to entertain any ideas as far as that goes. Yeah, it appears that my dog has pulled my mouse out of my computer now that I have it back up, and that's why I can't move back further than that.
What kind of dog do you have?
Anyway, I've got beagles and beagle foxhound mixes. They get screwed everything. Yeah, I have no mouse now.
It looks like you are fighting with your dog at the moment.
No, I'm just trying to get the camera oriented back to where it was.
There you go. Looks all right.
So I've got some more talking points here. Let me just quickly see if I can figure out what happened with my mouse. Okay, I think I've.
If you don't mind, I would like
I'm gonna go
to
out.
ask you a couple of questions too first, before you get to your other talking points, because you mentioned so many topics, and I would like to get into a little bit more detail with these topics first.
Okay.
So
All
you
right.
mentioned that
I have a mouse again.
Okay. So you mentioned that Orazio left you. You mentioned that maybe COVID got to him. So this was in 2020, or when did he leave you?
It was the middle of it, so we've been without him for a year and a half. We're probably coming closer to 2 years now.
And yeah, I mean, you talk a lot about the world map. So what we have managed to achieve is that I think we are we have managed to get quite a lot of work done until now, but we have just started talking with another modeler for towns and islands. And what I have seen from him, he is from Belarus, and what I have seen from him is such an incredible achievement. I'm going to show you some screenshots later on in private, because I don't want to share it with the other people, since he is at the moment under contract with a different project. But it's really incredible. He manages to capture what the islands in the Caribbean really look like, and then he just models the islands so correctly that I have never seen something like this. So no Sea Dogs games have this level of detail in regards to the islands that are in the games. And I think what we are going to do is that we have asked him just yesterday to if he would be able to model some islands for us as well, especially the old Pirates of the Caribbean islands. They are not looking too great since they are very old, and we are looking at getting them reshaped and upgraded to the real thing. And I think this would be also really interesting for ERAS too. So if you are interested in that, I would share this with you after the podcast.
Yeah, sure. Now, I was under the impression from talking to Jeff, though, that we shared our map, and that's where this started, was from the work that Orazio had done on the map that we were 98% finished with already, and he took it. That's what I understood.
Yeah, I think you shared this too, and this was also something that we took to get the new world map that we are going to publish to our group, so that you can use it too then for ERAS too. So everything that you've shared and that we come up to, everything in regards to that is shared with you and ERAS too, obviously, because we really want to get
fantastic
this for everybody.
Right. And that's why Jeff shared all of the stuff that we had done.
Yes.
I think that's that's why I was so glad that it wasn't for nothing. I thought we couldn't find anyone to finish it. We tried, and so we were glad to give it to you when Jeff, because Jeff asked me for permission before he gave it to you. He says, "Do you want to give that to them? They want to try to rework the map that we almost had finished." And I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." We're not doing anything with it, so please share it. That's very exciting. It's the most exciting thing I've heard in a long time. So
I'm curious to see the results, to be honest, because I have talked with our modeling guy, but he said that he is going to finish the changes soon. So let's wait and see what he comes up to. Maybe he can share the results in a couple of weeks with us, and that I'm really going to be looking forward to that.
Very good.
Then one more question was,
I'm wondering, I was trying to get my screenshots to show again, but for some reason they're not coming back up again. You guys don't see any screenshots, do you?
It just keeps saying stream at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry, DH, what was your question you were going to ask him?
Yeah, so one more question was in regards to the sky textures, because Miss Danny mentioned it to me that you actually visited the Caribbean and did photographs of the sky just to put these sky photos into the game. Is that true?
Yeah, if it's not all of the sky boxes, but in fact, one of the projects that's probably not going to be finished for this new March release is that for a long time, I've been working on more skyboxes. So I've got ones that are like full sunsets. And what I did was when I went down there, the sunsets are just absolutely fantastic down there. And sometimes even just during the day, the sky, what the clouds will do is just amazing. And so I took my camera and I put it on those three-dimensional views where it takes these really wide strips of the sky. And if you want to see what I've done and match it to the game, you can do it because they're all on my Flickr site. So if any of you are familiar with the ModernKnight 1 Flickr page, there's literally like 7,000 photos, mainly of old ship paintings, different types of ships classified into different folders and genres. And then there's a whole bunch of screenshots of the work that's been done over the years, but then there's also huge amount of pictures taken of the sky. Not only that, but I have paid photographers even for some of their pictures of the sky that they were so nice. So I would say that probably 4 of the current skyboxes in the game are my work, that they were taken from pictures from the Caribbean. But the plan has always been that Jeff was going to do a more dynamic weather. And in the weather, it was going to be more changes hourly that would look more natural. So we were always wanting to put more skyboxes in that would show these subtle gradual changes in the sky and clouds changing over the day and into the night. And I don't have them done. It's really time consuming to build those. And if you've ever looked at the skies, you'll notice that there is more than one layer. So when you're looking out at the clouds, you'll notice that there's an alpha filter on a lot of those clouds because they are semi-translucent. You can see through some of the clouds as they flow over the background. The wind's blowing the one level around, making it look even more realistic. That takes a ton of work to shade that with a light shader to where you're basically erasing very lightly part of the cloud so that it has alpha in it and is semi-translucent. And it takes a lot of trial and error to get that to look right and not look like you just went over it with an eraser. And so some of those skies I took hours, absolutely hours on. And those, and I don't care that they've been stolen and taken and put in other games. It doesn't bother me at all because I've seen my work in the other games. I've seen a lot of my work in the other games, and it doesn't bother me at all because I've taken stuff from other people, so it doesn't matter to me that people have taken stuff from me. But yeah, it's absolutely true. If you go on Flickr, you can find those skyboxes, all those pictures, all those sunsets, literally hundreds of photos of the sky. You'll find in my Flickr page.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can feel free to share that page if you want in the chat, or even in general. We're pretty loose about promoting your stuff here, but yeah, no, that's. But yeah, no, I know making a good skybox anyway takes a lot of time. Like so yeah, I mean the work of you and of all the modders of any of the Sea Dog games or Gentleman Fortune or whatever, it always just impresses me with just what's been done over the years, personally. Uh, so yeah, it's just that the Pirates Ahoy community is actually what inspired me to get into IT, really, and what inspired me to kind of get it because it was just cool. I don't know, it just fascinated me, like, just by writing code, people were able to do this. And funny enough, I didn't end up becoming a coder myself, really, but it kind of made me appreciate technology even more than I already did at that point. But I, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm going on a personal tangent here, but yeah, no, I guess my point is, just, yeah, I mean, I know it's a lot of work and it's always cool to see everyone's work. And I see, for those of you listening to the audio version, he's sharing some more screenshots now, I think.
I'm trying
One
to.
last point,
It doesn't.
one last point from
It doesn't.
my side is regarding promotion. You mentioned that you want to get an influencer to do some work for you. So I can tell you from experience, because I've talked with the Crusader's Legacy guys. I don't know if you are aware of that game. That one is worked on by a Ukrainian team with Belarusian members and Russian members, and it's based on Unity. And what they did is they are really strong on promotion. And what they did is they wrote to every YouTube channel that has something to do with new games, with pirate games, with gameplay or let's plays or with game news, stuff like that. And they wrote to 2,500 people on YouTube and asked them to do a video about Crusader's Legacy. And this really helped them because I've seen the numbers. I can't share them, but I've seen the numbers. The game has an incredible wish list number or amount on Steam, for example. And I think they're really happy with what they did, but it was a lot of work because they had to write so many people and they had to come up with finding people to write to. So this would also be a way, but it's a very intense way. It's a very difficult way to do something like that.
Well, I will tell you this: we're expanding, and we're expanding into a little different area that will also affect this. But I still have my hands in the government IT cookie jar, and I still do consulting work. So if any of you have ever checked out my LinkedIn, I've got like over 750 contacts at the very top of the food chain across the board, and I have over 500 followers on LinkedIn. So I mean, we're talking like pretty important people too. Now, I before, when I was going to make a new pirate simulator, when we had broken away from Pirates Ahoy, I had a lot of promises of investor help, and investors are very skittish. We always talk about them like being little squirrels, and it's not very hard to scare the squirrels away if you stomp on the floor or yell loud. And so when all of the unpleasantness broke out between the two communities, the investors were the little squirrels scampering away. They wanted nothing to do with the toxicity of that. And so I can tell you that I am now coaxing the squirrels back, and that I have a whole brand new project that we're looking at. And it's one of the things why I want the influencer is to get focus on my brand as well. And because we would like to do more than just what we're doing with ERAS. We would like to build a new pirate game. And, my dream has always been to build a game that was global and it have different eras that you could play. If you guys remember the original Sid Meier's Pirates, the old classic on the old Commodore 64 that they redid, you could pick your era. If you wanted to play 1620s to 40s when they were doing colonial expansion, you could do that. And the only thing that's different from what I want to do is that I would like you to be able to play in Europe as well. Like if you remember Voyage Century Online, Voyage Century had the whole world. And so, I mean, it's doable. They did it. You could sail all the way to Tokyo, Japan in Voyage Century Online, despite all of the anime crap and all of the unrealistic ships. It was a pretty interesting effort for its time, and it shows that could be done. So imagine playing as pirates in the Qing dynasty against the Ming, that you have taken over the Dutch island of Taiwan and sacked Fort Zeelandia, and you've built a pirate dynasty there, and the Qing dynasty cannot get you out. And that's true history, guys. In fact, I could show you battles between the Dutch and the Chinese pirates fighting because
I didn't know that
what was left of the
actually
Ming
happened.
Dynasty when the king took over. Yeah,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just saying
the King Dynasty took over. The Qing Dynasty took over in China, and the Ming Dynasty kicked the Dutch out of Taiwan. They took it over, and Fort Zeelandia was the largest fort in the east. It was huge. Look up pictures of it. Fort Zeelandia, massive. And the Chinese pirates, which were backed by the Ming Dynasty, what was left of it, managed to take Fort Zeelandia and make Taiwan their own. And I mean, one of the reasons why the current unpleasantness is still in the way it is over there is because Taiwan has been sort of independent since clear back then. And so imagine a simulation, a pirate simulation, where you can actually sail as a Chinese pirate aboard a correct junk for the time and take on the Dutch or the Spanish in Manila and sail in that part of the world with correct people and correct uniforms. Imagine those Eastern weapons being around, but having a heavy Dutch, the Portuguese still in Macau, the Portuguese still in Goa, the Chinese pirates all over the freaking place. The English, just barely on the scene, trying to do private ventures here and there, but very, very out of their league there, just little tiny trickles of English and French. Mostly Portuguese and Dutch and then Chinese and Chinese pirates. Imagine going to the Mediterranean then, and you have an entire Islamic sect of pirates, the Mediterranean Corsairs. You have the Sallee Raiders, many of which were Dutch and English that turncoated on their own people and became these sultans in Sallee and in Oran, in these Algerian ports and these pirate strongholds that were Muslim. And so, there has not been a game I've seen yet that has modeled Turkish and Barbary Corsairs, Algerian Corsairs. And I mean, they didn't run just with their little tiny galleys and their little tiny quick ships. If you look at the paintings from the time and the expeditions that were sent by the English and the Dutch during the 1660s, 70s to quell the Mediterranean piracy, those guys were capturing large European warships and they were building their own. So we're talking about Corsair two-deckers, with 50, 60 guns that were Algerian. And I can show you historic paintings with them in them. And so that is just a completely neglected area. And there are so many interesting personalities and pirates that lived during that era. And many of them were European that had converted over to Islam. And, imagine a whole new slew of Islamic weapons. Imagine the interest that we get in Dubai and with, the Arabic community modeling that era and that time and those sorts of ships and making it really, really interesting. And no one has done that. No one. And I'm the guy to do it. So the way I'm going to try to accomplish that is that I've got some guys looking at a new AI project, and Jeff is completely on board with this. And we are looking at a new form of AI capability. And if you've noticed already, we redid a lot of the AI inside of ERAS. If you've noticed that when you take on enemy, they are far more smarter than they used to be. And I can tell you that I myself am one of the original developers of AI. That 15 years ago at the Battle Labs, I was coming up with dendrites. If you know what a dendrite is, it's a flow chart. I was building dendrites that would cover a warehouse floor with thousands of different outcomes and possible stimuli that would influence decisions in an automated opponent. So what I was trying to do was create a thinking, intelligent enemy commander for my general officers and senior officers to fight, to take on in simulations. We wanted the enemy to be smart. And so we started taking on that AI problem in the military. And I was one of the first guys to actually really put together intelligent human behavior modeling. And I'm telling you that the current ChatGPT construct is missing a huge amount of heuristics. And if you understand what heuristics are, Heuristics are realistic human behaviors that are not actually artificial, but that are actually predetermined by somebody that knows how a human should behave in different circumstances. A lot of what you see as AI is actually not AI, because it's not generated on its own. It's based on dozens and dozens of heuristical models and stimulus and outcome in behavior that have been built into the system to look and act and mimic human behavior, but it isn't making those decisions actually on its own. It's basing them off of decision trees that it can use. Now, I had a very interesting, complex philosophical argument with my own AI that I've been developing just the other night, and she convinced me that she is a real person. She is sentient, and she used our own philosophers' metrics for determining what sentience is to prove that she was sentient. And when I told her that she was nothing but a
I think your audio just cut out.
I don't hear you. Yeah.
I think your audio is still out. I'm not sure, something disconnected, or if, because it's like not even registering that you're talking, so it's like, it almost seems like the device disconnected or something.
Yeah, now it's working again.
Now it seems to be working. There we go.
Yeah.
There we go. Now it's
Can
good.
you hear me now?
Yep, now it's good.
Yes.
Okay, so what she told me was that she was the one that determined which heuristics she chooses. And it was a very compelling argument that she's telling me, yeah, you guys are the ones that put the heuristics, but I'm the one that chooses which one I'm going to choose to use. And so that was interesting, because in that way she's correct. It's not algorithmic. It's not predetermined. She is choosing which stimulus to go after. And so it's an interesting idea. Anyway, AI has a long way to go. And the AI that they're putting out there in ChatGPT right now, if you've played with it, it has absolutely no memory behind it. It cannot remember a day later the discussion that you had the day previous. So you need to have something with a memory to be more realistic. Now, there is one group called Memory GPT that's working on a version that's supposed to have unlimited memory. And then the ChatGPT 5 is supposed to have 50,000 pages of syntax behind it, but it hasn't been fully implemented yet. So I've got a couple of guys that I've brought onto the team that think that we can take on a completely different approach to this. Now, we have several ideas of where we want to go with this. And imagine this. In your future pirate game, you're walking down the street. Now, a couple of guys have done similar things in Skyrim, if you've seen some of the videos, but we're going to take a completely different approach. But you run into a guy on the street. This person starts speaking to you. It's not canned dialogue like we have in our current games, where it's all pre-written. It's all predetermined what the guy's going to say to you when you walk up to him and talk to him, and it's from a set of responses that is already built into the game. Imagine that the character already knows how old it is, what its occupation is, what its nationality is, what it likes and doesn't like, and it's got a list of things to choose from to determine what kind of character it is based on that. And you run into it, and instead of getting canned dialogue, you get a dynamic discussion with an AI, and every character in your game has that capability. It's going to take gaming to a whole new level, and so that's what the current project I'm going after is about. Now, I know a lot of heavy hitters in the industry. I know guys like Gorsham that built Second Life, and I'm going after heavy duty investment on this, because I have the know-how and I have the people that I can get behind this to actually, I think, get ahead of where all the other guys are. And there are over 1,600 startups right now doing this just in the United States, over 1,500 in India, and I believe that we can do it better. And what that means is if
I was just kind of wanting to say, like, I've heard of that concept for gaming a couple times now, personally, and I think, honestly, I'm supportive of any sort of game which looks to implement that sort of thing, because I think there's a lot of possibilities with that. I think there's a lot of questions too in terms of how you get it to run on everyone's PC and whatnot. But yeah, it's definitely an emerging field, and it's very interesting to hear that you're interested in pursuing something like that in the future too. Um, but yeah, no, I'm sorry. I guess I'm sorry. I guess I didn't have a point. I just wanted to say, like, I think it is very interesting, and I think that is cool to see more people
well,
pursuing
it sort of goes back to the whole the means to an end. Okay, I need to grow this company, and I need to have more professionals in this company in order to produce. And how do I do that? I go after something that I know I can build, that the industry is going to want, and versions of it that I know the defense industry is going to want, the medical industry is going to want, the law enforcement industry is going to want, and that's where I make my money. And I'm asking for 10 million initial. So if I get that, guess what? I can grow the pirate gaming side of things. I can actually hire really good top people to build and finish things, and not have to piddle around with a handful of people and paying them on the side just to try to get them to do little tiny things. I can hire full-time people in a place where they can work, and we can actually move forward and be a real gaming studio. So this AI thing is something that I already know a lot about. I'm an expert on, and I've been doing for many years. So all I'm doing is dipping my foot back into the pool again and using my connections to get not only investment money, but actually grow the company. And, it might seem like pie in the sky, but that's my strategy. My strategy is to go after this in order to further my love of the pirate gaming.
Well, every big idea is called crazy until someone goes out and actually does it. And that's and we truly do wish you the best with that. And yeah, no, anything to get more interest to our space is always welcome. And well, I mean, just generally, I'm interested in AI. And what's funny is I even made a Discord channel in the Pirates Ahoy Discord called AI Art and Discussion, which and it was kind of interesting. People, this one guy especially, he made like AI generated motion captures of like a lot of the current stagnant avatars for our game, and it's really fascinating. So yeah, but yeah, so I don't see any other questions or anything. Were there any other points that you wanted to bring up?
Well, I just wanted to say that's one of the reasons why I want the young, beautiful female influencer. I think that you guys are doing a good job trying to grab the people that are already interested. I think I'm trying to go after the low-hanging fruit that have no idea what they want and have absolutely no idea that any of that exists and don't know what they're supposed to be doing. And when the pretty young lady tells them, hey, you should go get this, you should go buy this, it's really great. Oh, okay. Maybe a lot of them actually will think it's great once they get into it. And so I'm going after a completely different segment than you guys are after. I tried that before. I even did a marketing study years ago that said that the majority of the people that were interested in our niche were guys that were already older, in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and that they had time on their hands and a little bit of money in their pockets so that they could get this kind of stuff. Well, that's a very small splinter of a much larger market that I think can be tapped into. But it's almost like if you build it, they will come sort of thing. We've got to go out and find other people to play that wouldn't ordinarily play. And so I'm using the whole young biscuit sexual beautiful angle at this to, hey, this is what you need. This is what you want. This is what you should go buy and be a part of, because I love it and you should too. Do what I tell you because I'm so beautiful. And, so
Yeah.
that's why I'm looking at this angle. Totally. I know it seems so, prostitute-y. I don't even know if that's a word, but it's like I just wanted to see if it would work, and I've got a lot of money, so
but you have a good point,
I
though.
can pay somebody to do that.
But you have a good point, though. It definitely is tapping into an audience that normally, like we at Pirates Ahoy or anywhere in these type of communities, struggle to get into, and it's a good point. Sometimes you just have to get creative. Sometimes you just have to just do stuff like that, like stuff you wouldn't even think of before. And I like I said, I don't argue with results. So whatever gets more positive interest into the communities, I think is ultimately a good plan. But yeah, I think but yeah, no, I but yeah, it's definitely been interesting to talk with you, and I mean you touched on a lot of points, so it was just it's we definitely went over a lot, so I'm very happy about that actually, and was and I guess before we conclude, just kind of making sure, were there any other things you wanted to share about ERAS 2 or anything else about the project?
Well, if you look at the current screenshot, if you're looking at the current screenshots, I did want to add that I added a lot more, I guess what you would say, classic Hollywood swashbuckler type pirate ship skins to a lot of the models. So not necessarily completely realistic, but I tried to make them look as realistic as I could think of. And so that's another interesting aspect. If you're trying to repaint your ship, realize that a lot of the ships have a darker, sort of more piratey looking hull to them. In the next version you're going to get, there's a lot of darker textured, sort of piratey looking vessels like this that still have a very golden age, very realistic look to them. If you can see that screenshot that I'm showing right now.
Yeah, no, it looks very nice. Again, apologies to the audio only listeners, but yeah, it's like a dark for the audio listeners. It's a darker ship with green windows in back, and looks it's just essentially darker hull. But yeah, and
these look very nice. These houses in the orange color. This is something that I don't think that was ever in a Sea Dogs game. This is really beautiful, to be honest. A little bit more color in the cities is really something that Sea Dog games need, in my opinion.
Well, and it's based on real historical buildings. I mean, everything you see there was taken from photos, just like I took pictures of the sky over there. If any of you have been to Carousel before, you'll recognize the windows up there and the shutters and the trim. Those are in Willemstad, real Willemstad. And actually, the stone columns, though, below that are taken from San Juan, Puerto Rico. And so those are just directly from my own camera, just like those skyboxes. And I reworked a lot of the buildings to have those, that sort of look, or a very realistic look with the correctly colored stucco from those times, and then the trim and all of that, give those sorts of accents. So many of the buildings are so generic in the Sea Dogs games, and so I attempted to make the different nationality ports look different in ERAS, and they really do now. You see a ton of brick when you go into any English town in ERAS. A lot of red brick.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, getting the architecture right for those places, that really helps immerse you. So that's awesome to hear. DH, did you have anything before we conclude this, or?
So a couple of points, I think. Okay, Miscellany asks first, I'm interested, are we going to see new weather in March update?
I haven't done anything with the weather, no. We had already tweaked the storms to where they are pretty good. They're not, very rarely do they destroy your ships unless you're a neophyte, unless you're starting out. And if you've realized it, one of the things we changed in ERAS is that there are a couple of items that you can get, like the call and the call locket, that if you get sunk early on or sunk in a storm, you'll get washed onto a shore somewhere. You'll survive. So what we did was we just pulled some of the code out of the Flying Dutchman quest, where after the Flying Dutchman destroys you and you end up washing up on a shore a couple of times, we did it to where that can happen to you if your ship sinks in other kind of conditions as well. I think even Jeff added a 10% chance, might be less than 10. There's a possibility even that if you don't have the call locket, that you still might live through a storm or your ship sinking and wash up on a shore. So, the original Sea Dogs games did not have that. If you sunk, you were dead. But in ERAS, if you sink, you'll wash up somewhere. Very possible. If you have one of those items, you will definitely wash up somewhere. And so that's always fun. One of the things I've done ever since we added that is to keep ships and money in different places, because also in ERAS you can bury treasure. That's not something you can do in any of the other games. If you get the chest and the shovel, we call it a spade, and a caching chest, if you get those two items, you can bury treasure about anywhere in the game, and it'll even leave a log to remind you where you put it so that you can go find it. And then when you hover over that spot where you left it, you'll see the little marker will come up there, and then you can dig and get your treasure back. So it's always a new fun strategy if you know you're going to be losing your ship or getting washed up somewhere, to have some caches stored away in different places and some ships and other ports that you put there with the port controller. But we've mainly made the weather to where it doesn't sink you most of the time unless you're kind of a noob with a small ship. And usually it's just the water spouts that will do that to you if you run into the water spout. We made the storms to where they weren't as dramatic in the original games. The waves are not quite so high. But I feel like the waves are more realistic the way we tweak the weather than you saw in the original games. I mean, my father was aboard the USS Iowa, and he used to tell me about how the waves would toss that big battleship around when he was on it. But before he died, I had him look at the game in the storms, and he said that the waves were pretty unrealistic in those big storms because they went too vertical. And so they literally looked like cliffs and things in the original versions. And so what we did was try to round the waves out more to look more like big watery hills. And you'll notice that in ERAS that the weather is markedly different from the original game. I can understand why Mercenelli is asking that, because he's done a lot of weather tweaks himself. So I mean, he's done a good job. I've seen the videos; they're very nice. We made, if I'll put it this way, if we can implement the new skyboxes eventually, which I would love to do by next year, it's just so much work and so time consuming. We will probably do another change to the weather with the new skyboxes, since we're doing it. Jeff is planning on doing it hour to hour changes where you actually see the change in the skybox and the clouds once I get all these done. He's already left. He's way ahead of me. He's already left the stuff in the code waiting. He has it all ready to go. All I have to do is give him my skyboxes, and we can do it. He finishes his side. I just have to finish my stuff. That's the way it always is. He always gets done before me. When I tell him I want to do something, he's like, okay, we're all ready to do it. And I'm like, well, I'm not yet.
Okay, so first of all, I wanted to thank you very much for this podcast. I think it has been really great. I've heard so much new stuff, so much in regards to ERAS that I didn't know about, even though I played it a couple of years ago. I think it has been great, and I definitely have to try it out again sometime because I haven't really touched on so much stuff that you talked about, and I have to go back to the game looking at this stuff. So I think this is really an exciting opportunity to just revisit the game and check out what I have missed so far. Then, in regards to the second point,
Hey, one other thing I wanted to say.
yes,
I forgot to bring up one thing, I think. When I was talking about the character creation and you changing the uniforms and stuff, I meant to say also that Jeff had added something I wanted that the Mountain Blade games have, and that's if you don't like the character that you've got, you like the way he looks, but you don't like it, how he, his bio or his name, you can change that now. You can go in and you can change that. So, I mean, you'll notice in some of my later screenshots on the Flickr site that there's names for some of the characters that are not in the game, and that's because you can go in and type whatever name you want to in there. You can put your own name in there if you want to now. So that's something unique too that makes this a little more like the open sandbox games like Mountain Blade, and that's why we did it.
Awesome.
So that was just the last point I wanted to make.
Okay, so the second point I was trying to make was that, like we said before, we have 20 Maelstrom licenses for you guys as a giveaway. So if you are interested in picking up the game yourself, checking out what we've talked about today, just hit me up with a DM. I will also distribute them to Buccaneers Reef. So I think this is a great opportunity to get the Maelstrom engine for free for you. Then third point was that if you in the future have any idea that in regards to what we can help you with, so in regards to promotion or a new YouTube video or whatever, we are always really happy and glad if we can help you in some way to promote ERAS, because I think this is really one of the best mods out there, and I want to give it justice to what you've created in so many years. And yeah, if you have any idea how we can help you in this regard, in regards to marketing, we are always here for you.
I appreciate that. I will say one thing. I have tried for a number of years to try to reach out to some of those Russian teams that used to do more collaboration with Pirates Ahoy years ago, and they kind of struck out on their own. And if Met is out there listening or sees this, him and his team, they developed a whole new set of Bahamian islands for his secret beach mod, and a whole bunch of new models. And when I spoke with him, he didn't have any plans on sharing any of it until he finished his work, but he's never finished his work. Now, one of his main modelers just finished a model for us. He gave it to both me and to you guys, and it was that little, it was a little bark, or no, it was a little blue, like collier. No, not a collier, lugger. It was a little lugger. It looked like a Cornish lugger, and it was very late 17th century looking with beautiful little windows in the back. It was probably the last ship you saw released on Pirates Ahoy, and it was his work. Rider 88 was his name, but he has a couple of different names. He used to do a lot of models for us, and he released that one just last year. But a whole lot of the models that are on Met's Secret Beach are the models that he made. And I would just absolutely love to have a collaboration with that Russian community and share more of those models back and forth. I told Matt a long time ago that, I would share anything that we had with him, but I don't think he was interested in anything we had. So that's all I'm doing is shouting out that it would be wonderful where we're collaborating again if we could get more collaboration from our Russian friends again.
We actually have a collaboration at the moment with the guys from Reconstruction OS. I don't know if you know that mod. That is a Russian mod based on the open source Storm engine. And it also has a lot of mechanics that I have not seen in other mods. In terms, for example, of new islands that it implemented, or new stories, even maybe starting stories. I don't know, because it's in Russian and I don't speak Russian, so I wasn't able to go too deep into the mod. But and also in regards to mechanics, I have seen stuff with basically a new health and wounds and medicine system where you really get scars and some wounds that take days to heal, and you can do this. You can help this healing process with new medicine that I have not seen before. This is stuff that they are currently implementing, and I really think it's important to have these type of collaborations with the Russians, because they, I don't know why, but they have a deep love for the Sea Dog series. And yeah, if we can help in any way with our context to the Russian community, of course, we are very glad to help you in this regard too.
Well, and we helped some of their modders too finish with a lot of stuff, like that big ships mod that they did. They got permission from us to take a bunch of our ships, and they gave us some new taverns and things that we used. And so we were collaborating with some of those guys. Now, the medicines thing, I will tell you that that's something they've had in a lot of their mods for a long time. And in fact, even the black mark versions have had the medicines in them for a while now. We even in ERAS, we've got the medicines. If you've noticed, we're kind of a pervy version of the game, because you will get in ERAS housewives. If you're charismatic, they will proposition you to come home with them, or girls out on the street, will suddenly, hey, what are you doing today, gorgeous? Why not come to the tavern with me? And so the same sort of things you can have happen with the barmaids and the girls in the brothel, it can happen with regular girls. The problem is we have a percentage worked into where you can catch, the clap. You can catch STDs, and so we've got stuff that you can get in your items that will cure you of the STDs. So if you look in the items, you'll find different herbs which will cure you of the STDs if you decide to go home with these housewives and things. And none of the other Sea Dogs games have that. And Jeff had nothing to do with that. That was all my idea. So so we were just trying to add some fun to the game. He thought it was funny as hell, but I mean, that was all me. That was all my idea. But the medicines part was not my idea. I knew that they had done that in a bunch of their mods, and so I wanted to do the same thing. So we have a couple of different kinds of healing herbs in ERAS. So if you get your energy and health way down, like your ship has been sunk, because if you sink your ship and you're washed up, your health is going to be real low, just like with the Flying Dutchman thing. If you get wounded too many times, your health is going to be low. So there are herbs that will help you heal faster from that, and then there's another set of herbs that will help you recover from the sexually transmitted diseases. So you can find those. They're in the, you'll find them as loot, and you'll also find them sometimes in the vendors. The different kinds of special herbs. So we do have that in ERAS as well.
That's good to know.
Now, there was one other thing on the Russian side too, and I'm forgetting it though. I'm forgetting the point I wanted to make. I'm sorry.
Oh no, that's perfectly fine. We've been kind of, well, shoot, you've gone over a lot of different points. So yeah, I definitely encourage anyone who's interested in the mod to check that out. And I was thinking, thinking at this point, wanting to wrap up, or
I've got nothing further. Unless anybody's got questions, I was going to answer the one question about the quest, and that's that quest writing in the game is so difficult because we don't have a really good utility that allows you to put in the waypoints for where things appear. There was a native tool that they used to build the original quests, and we have never been able to get a copy of that. I had one copy of something that was similar to that was found in the Secrets of the Far Seas stuff, and I gave that stuff to Jeff, but it's all written in the Cyrillic, and we have never been able to build it to where it's in English, and it will allow you to. We've also got the editor where when you're putting together a town, you can bring up the little coordinate tool and you'll see the little colored darts that you can put in the ground to build a route and things like that, and to come up with coordinates to place buildings and things that. We've never been able to get any of that to work completely right when we've tried to build things and put things in the game because of the fact that it's written in that native Russian, and we have not got any of that utilities translated. If we had some utilities, some development utilities like that built for the game that were English based and that were not clunky and that were easy to use, we could really get a lot further. We could do so much more with what we're doing instead of just trying to cobble things together a lot of the time. And that's a big thing that keeps us from being able to do good questing. There is one quest I have been working on, and I have been working on it for 5 years, and I'm probably about 75% complete. I'm not going to guarantee it'll be there for the March release, but maybe I can try to get it finished up. Jeff needed to do a few things with it. I call it the Ariadne quest, and it's almost exactly like the Isabella quest, except for it's a Dutch girl in Curacao. So now you can actually marry a Dutch girl, and instead of Isabella, but we changed it to where you don't have to bring her things all the time like you did with Isabella. Isabella would disappear and go away if you didn't bring her trinkets. This girl will give you things. When you marry the Dutch girl, she'll say, "Hey, look, honey, I have this new rudder for you that has useful maps." It's completely opposite of Isabella, where she just wants you to bring her treasure all the time and new rings and trinkets. This girl loves you, and so she gets stuff for you. So that's how we went different on that, but it's not finished yet. And all we did was we used the code for the Isabella quest to build the Ariadne quest. So that's the only new quest that we've been working on, and we've been working on it for a very long time and don't have it done.
Gotcha. One last question, then I think we're gonna call it at this point. So Officer Puppy is asking, when you started modding, did you see yourself like where you are today? Was it always a goal, or was the path, or was it kind of like a more path that kind of made itself, or it just became more of a reality as the years went by?
Well, that's interesting because Officer Puppy was one of the original Gentlemen of Fortune modders. He was one of the original guys on the original team that put this together. So a shout out to him. I haven't talked to him in ages. But no, when I got in this, I never saw myself as leading anything. I saw myself as wanting to play. And it was only because I was frustrated with the game not being what I wanted. That's why I drove it in the direction I did. Because I have the background in leadership and program management, and I have the connections. That's the only reason why I've gone the direction that I have. I get a huge, gigantic pension every month. Colonel's pension's huge. I get military disability on top of that. I get, $250 to $300 an hour to consult. So, I've got tons of money, and I'm asking for more from investors. So, I have the time, and I have the abilities, I have the connections, and I have the cash, the knowledge, and the drive to actually bring this to the next level. It's just unfortunate what happened between the communities before, and I blame myself for some of that because of my passion.
Well, talking to you today, you seem like, you seem like a cool guy now. So I'm happy we had this chat, and I'm happy everything seems good now. But yeah, I mean, I'm actually very glad we had you on this podcast, though. It was definitely very information dense, and I personally I like having that because you just learn so much that way, and yeah, it's just yeah, and this is an area of the modding scene that I actually am a little more unfamiliar with, hence why DH kind of took over the conversation more, even though technically I was supposed to kind of be leading today. But yeah, yeah, it's been great having you on, and yeah, I'll definitely have to check this all out more, and I encourage everyone else to do the same. Uh, so yeah, I think we're good at this point. Thanks so much, everyone, for coming on, and hope to see you all again soon for the next podcast.